Right now, somewhere in your body, a warning light is on. You can't see it. You can't turn it off. It doesn't look like pain. It doesn't feel like danger. But your nervous system is treating it exactly the same way it would treat a predator in the dark. That warning light is loneliness, and the real answer to what it actually is will change the way you see every quiet night you've ever spent alone. You probably think loneliness is just sadness, a mood, something that passes. It isn't. It's older than sadness. It's older than language. It's a survival alarm your ancestors could not afford to ignore, wired into you long before you had the words to describe it. 200,000 years ago, a human alone was a human about to die. Not eventually. Soon. There were no locks on doors, because there were no doors. There was no calling for help, because help only existed if it was already standing next to you. A solitary human on the savannah had no one to watch the perimeter while they slept, no one to help carry water, no one to help fight off a hyena at the edge of the firelight. Isolation didn't just feel bad. It was a death sentence with a very short countdown. So evolution did what it always does. It built an alarm. That alarm is loneliness. And like every alarm your body carries, it doesn't whisper, it screams. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo spent decades studying this exact mechanism. He found that loneliness activates the same neural circuitry as physical pain. Your brain, when it registers social disconnection, does not file it under emotional discomfort. It files it under threat to survival. The ache you feel after a breakup, after a friend moves away, after a holiday spent by yourself, is not a metaphor. It is your oldest alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's where it gets stranger. That alarm doesn't just make you feel bad. It changes your behavior in ways you don't consciously choose. Cacioppo's research showed that lonely people become hypervigilant. Their brains start scanning for threats more aggressively. Social situations that would normally feel neutral start to feel loaded, even hostile. You've probably felt this. A friend takes a few hours to text back, and some ancient part of you starts building a case for abandonment. That's not weakness. That's 40,000 generations of ancestors who could not afford to misread the group's mood, because being cast out meant being alone, and being alone meant being dead. But the alarm doesn't stop at your emotions. It goes deeper. It goes into your blood. Loneliness raises cortisol. It raises inflammation. It disrupts sleep in ways that mirror chronic stress. Your body, still convinced it's standing exposed on an open plain, starts preparing for a fight it will never actually have to have. Your immune system, designed across millennia to expect wounds from claws and rival tribes, starts behaving as if an injury is already on its way. It primes itself for damage that never comes, and that priming has a cost, paid quietly day after day, in wear on your heart and your arteries. Psychologist Julianne Holt-Lunstad ran one of the largest analyses ever conducted on this question. She pulled together data from over 300,000 people across dozens of studies. Her conclusion was almost unbelievable. Chronic loneliness increases your risk of early death by an amount comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Comparable to obesity, comparable to physical inactivity. Think about that for a second. Your body treats disconnection with the same severity it treats a pack and a half of cigarettes every single day. Not because being alone is inherently dangerous anymore, but because your biology never got the memo that the world changed. You live in a world of full grocery stores, locked doors, and phones that can summon help in seconds. And still, some deep ancient layer of you reacts to a quiet Friday night the way your ancestors would have reacted to being separated from the tribe on a dark, predator-filled plain. To understand why the alarm is calibrated this way, You have to understand the size of the world it was built for. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying primate brains and social groups, and he found a consistent number, around 150. That's roughly how many stable relationships a human brain can meaningfully track. The same number that shows up again and again in hunter-gatherer bands, in military companies, in small villages across history. 150 faces, 150 voices, 150 people whose absence you would notice and who would notice yours. Your alarm system was calibrated for that number, and for something else just as important. Proximity. Not just knowing 150 people, but sitting near them, eating with them, sleeping within earshot of them, every single day of your life. That was the baseline your ancestors' nervous systems considered normal. Anything less didn't register as a bit quiet. It registered as danger. This isn't just about adults either. It goes back to infancy. It goes back to the very beginning of attachment itself. In the 1950s, psychologist Harlow ran a set of experiments that still unsettle people today. He separated infant monkeys from their mothers and gave them two artificial substitutes. One was made of bare wire, but held a bottle of milk. The other was covered in soft cloth but offered no food at all. Logic says the monkeys should have clung to the one that fed them. They didn't. The infant monkeys spent nearly all their time clinging to the soft cloth mother, only visiting the wire one briefly to feed. When Harlow introduced something frightening into the cage, the monkeys ran, without hesitation, to the cloth mother, for comfort. Not the one with food, the one that felt like connection. What Harlow proved was almost heretical for its time. Attachment isn't just about survival needs like food and water. Connection is its own biological necessity. Comfort, contact, closeness. These aren't luxuries layered on top of survival. They are survival, wired in at the same depth as hunger and thirst. You carry that same wiring today. When you're overwhelmed, you don't reach for a spreadsheet of your problems. You reach for a person, a voice, a hand on your shoulder. That instinct isn't sentimental. It's ancient hardware, still running. So why, in a world more connected than any point in human history, does loneliness keep climbing? Because your ancestors' alarm system was built for a specific kind of connection. Small tribes, constant proximity, shared meals, shared fires, shared physical space, day after day, for your entire life. Your alarm doesn't recognize 300 followers as a tribe. It doesn't register a group chat as a fire to sit around. It was calibrated for warmth you could feel, faces you could see, voices you could hear without a screen in between. You can be surrounded by contact and still be starving for connection, because your oldest system for measuring safety isn't counting notifications. It's counting something else entirely. Presence, proximity, the felt sense that someone would notice if you disappeared. Some governments have started treating this as seriously as your biology already does. The United Kingdom appointed a government minister dedicated entirely to loneliness, tasked with addressing what public health officials there began calling an epidemic. Japan followed with a similar role of its own, not because people are more isolated than they were during a famine or a war, but because the mismatch between how humans are wired and how humans now live has become wide enough for governments to notice, and wide enough for it to show up in hospital admissions. There's a chemical piece to this story too. Oxytocin, sometimes nicknamed the bonding hormone, floods your system during real physical closeness. A hug held a few seconds longer than necessary, a hand on your back, a shared laugh in the same room. It lowers stress. It calms the very alarm Cacioppo spent his career studying. But oxytocin doesn't respond to a text notification the way it responds to touch. Your body can tell the difference between hearing from someone and being with them, even when your conscious mind can't quite put the distinction into words. That's the part that should stop you. Not that loneliness is common. Everyone already knows that. What should stop you is that your body is still keeping score using rules from 200,000 years ago, and it does not care that the rules have changed. Consider what happens when this alarm goes unanswered for years instead of days. Cacioppo's later work followed people over time, not just at a single moment, and what he found was a feedback loop that tightens instead of loosening. Loneliness raises threat sensitivity. Higher threat sensitivity makes new connections feel riskier. Feeling riskier makes you withdraw a little further, and withdrawing a little further makes the loneliness deepen. Your ancestors never lived inside this loop because isolation on the savannah resolved itself quickly. You either found your way back to the group or you didn't survive long enough for the loop to matter. Modern life removed that second possibility. Now the loop can run for years, quietly, without ever forcing a resolution. There's also a strange twist buried in the research that most people never hear about. Loneliness isn't only about how many people surround you. Some of the loneliest people in Holt-Lunstad's data were married, employed, and living in crowded cities. What predicted the alarm wasn't headcount. It was the quality of felt connection, whether the people nearby actually functioned, biologically, as your tribe. A packed subway car full of strangers can leave your nervous system reading alone just as clearly as an empty room, because proximity, without belonging, doesn't satisfy the ancient checklist your brain is running in the background. So, what do you do with an alarm this old? You don't silence it. You can't. It's not a bug in your programming. It's a feature that kept every one of your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. What you can do is finally understand what it's asking for. Not more contact, not more likes, not more messages. It's asking for the thing it was built to detect in the first place. Someone close enough to notice, close enough to help, close enough to matter. Every time you choose a real conversation over a scroll, every time you sit across from someone instead of texting them, you are answering an alarm that has been ringing in one form or another for 200,000 years. Right now, somewhere in your body, that warning light is still on. It has been on for longer than civilization has existed. And the strangest part isn't that it's still there. The strangest part is that it might be the most honest thing your body has ever told you.